Well, I have great pleasure in introducing Dr. Guy Morrow, who's going to talk to us about remunerating artist managers. Thank you, Guy. Take it away.
Thanks, Nicole, and hello, everyone. It's good to see you this evening or morning or whatever time it is where you are right now. So this paper concerns the remuneration of artist managers in the field of popular music. It explores the proposition that more power and responsibility is resting with artist managers now, given shifts in the music industries due to digitisation. And this paper explores whether, because of this increased responsibility, artist managers need to be remunerated differently for the betterment of the industry overall. So artist managers are traditionally service providers who receive 15 to 20% as a commission of their artist's income. And in the past, this arrangement arguably worked well. And this is because artist managers had less influence and also less responsibility with other entities in the music business, such as record labels and promoters doing a lot of the work to connect an artist with an audience. So artist managers do much more of the heavy lifting now. And so they should arguably be given master points on each record their artist client releases and some small publishing share on each co-write, enabling them to have real equity in the businesses they are building. At least that's the proposition that I'd like to explore briefly with you here. So other industries offer their highly skilled business leaders stock options or equity. And the question of whether this is a viable and necessary arrangement for artist managers is an important one, given a key problem in the music industries, which is the brain drain of artist managers to other fields or, interestingly, to other roles in the music industries, which causes problems. So this paper draws on previous research conducted with the International Music Managers Forum, and also one currently being conducted with the Association of Artist Managers in Australia. And this paper is significant because it will address the issue of whether or not the way in which artist managers are remunerated is actually cramping the music business. So the background to this is really this article by Luke Gergis, and how the extent to which that article sparked interest in this topic, and then reignited a previous research project that I was involved with. So Luke argued that artist managers are the CEOs of musicians, and they are key not only to building equity in the artist brand, but they also hold all of the artist investors accountable for delivering on their promises. And this includes labels, promoters, and publishers, just to name a few. And so 50 years ago, the artist manager had less influence and also less responsibility. And at that time, getting paid a 20% commission of artist income was a great deal for an artist manager. Success and failure of an artist's career did not exclusively fall on their shoulders in the way that it arguably does now. So in this new age, the artist manager is arguably the most influential and contributing factor to an artist's career. And they need to be 10 steps ahead of the record labels. And they are the ones who, together with the artists, speak directly to fans and mobilise them. And they are the ones who are the driving force for co-writers and building copyright. So to put it simply, it is the artist manager who needs to develop the artist from nothing to a marketable entity so that the labels, publishers and promoters can begin their work to do what they do best. And smart artists understand that if they are successful, it's most likely because their manager is unbelievable at what they do and they have put together the right team and investors and mobilised them effectively. So Luke asked the question, when you think about it, well, actually made the statement, when you think about it, artists should be incentivising their managers to only focus on management. And this is because highly skilled managers usually do one of two things. They either move on to other industries or to other parts of the music industry that have more stability or higher pay, Or second, they start record labels, publishing and touring companies on the side to diversify their revenue and get some equity or an exit strategy in their business. And this is what is causing problems with regards, I'll explore, with regard to double dipping, and also with regard to artist managers actually getting in the way of their clients' progression in their career because they do set up labels or they set up as publishers when there may be a bigger fish who could sign the artist. And it's because they're chasing equity and some more security, essentially. So most tech companies offer stock options or real equity into the business for every staff member that joins. And why are artists not treating their managers, or as Luke argues, their CEOs, the same way? And managers take on this financial risk of an artist's career with no equity or extra incentive. And the analogy here is that it's no way to treat or retain your CEO, who's the most valuable person in progressing your career. So Luke argues that the solution is to give artist managers equity in their client's own business rather than their side hustle or their label or their other entity. So the research methods used for this project, which is a bit of a mix of projects, it's a past project meeting a new one, and also Luke's work in the middle, and I've pulled it together into a paper for the purposes of this symposium. But the main research that I'll report on here was carried out in New York, London, Toronto, Sydney and Melbourne between 2009 and 2017. And I conducted semi-structured interviews with 22 artist managers and self-managed artists. I'm in the preliminary stages of setting up focus groups and conducting more interviews with the assistance of the Association of Artist Managers. So in terms of a theoretical framework, we can ask these questions. What is artist management? Is it creative? And there's a debate within the creative and cultural industries literature as to whether the manager's role is a creative one. So while authors such as Bilton and Leary, Bilton and Robinson argue that it is, Banks, McGuigan and Hesmondolf and Baker argue that the conflation of creative and management is problematic because it divests artistically creative work of its privileges. And Bernard's notion of creativities can be used to aid conceptual clarity here. And pluralizing creativity, as Pamela Bernard does, enables us to understand that artistic creativity and managerial creativity are two different types of creativity that interact with one another in sometimes combustible ways and conflicting ways, and at other times in generative ones. And this also enables artistic creativity to remain unique when we conceptualize it in this way. The fact that the artist manager is managing the concrete and named labour of the artist means that there is a direct connection between the person, artist, and the product, to the extent that the artist may even over-identify with their work. Whilst artist management is arguably creative, the artist's labour is different in this way because it remains attached to its name. The artist's labour remains attached to their name. And there's also an affective element to artistic creativity that's not as evident in managerial creativity, with the latter's focus on problem solving, negotiating solutions, and strategizing. So the figure I use to represent this is this one, and positing this idea that artist management is a form of group creativity. And there's quite an old quote now that I am a fan of, from Francescona and Hetherington, who argued that if an artist is to become creatively or commercially successful, their career demands at least as much management as there is talent and ambition. And I think this is where this figure comes to life. And the premise of this paper is really around this proposition that the managerial creativities aren't being remunerated in a way that will be sustainable in a sense. So in terms of the data, the issue of the brain drain is an interesting one. And the Association of Artist Managers tries to get around this by offering mentoring through their processes, but that can introduce new problems such as client poaching. And this pull quote, thank you. This pull quote was a really useful one. One New York-based artist manager, Danny Goldberg, who most well known for managing Nirvana and or co-managing Nirvana, but he also has done a lot in the music business. And he said that, quote, 99 out of 100 new artists can't incentivize someone like me and people with smaller businesses to spend a year of their life managing a brand new artist and making almost no money. That's something you need young, inexperienced, but hopefully very smart people to do. And that's how a lot of managers get started, and that's how a lot of artists get started. And therefore, managers who are, working out of their apartment on their cell phone and don't have any staff, is sort of talking about this process of young managers and young artists getting together and the chasing deferred compensation through commissioning the artist's work, but ultimately it's not a sustainable way to work, or that individual tends to be put in a position where their client could be poached and these kinds of problems. So this point that there's now more fiscal responsibility residing with the artist manager was accompanied by the argument that artist managers have more professional autonomy than they've previously had. And another London-based artist manager noted that, quote, it was always frowned on when a manager took a position with a client that was deeper than a straight management commission type relationship. So, for example, if a manager who will have invested heavily with his or her time with cash put a proposal together to put to his client or her client to become his publisher or her record label, there was a lot of mistrust. And frankly, I think it was stirred up inappropriately by professional advisors, meaning lawyers, end quote. So there was a bit of a tension between the managers, who are the interviewees, and lawyers, or at least their perception of lawyers. This sort of idea that the lawyers are getting paid $300-400 an hour to tell managers that they're not allowed to participate in the equity of the businesses they're building, or that there was that kind of tension. And a bit of a theme was the idea that lawyers are seen as advisors, professional advisors, but they don't factor in the problems they contribute to the business themselves through the advice they give. And one example would be post-term commission structures, which within service provision agreements are actually a bit of a solution here with regard to a long tail. So you may have the 20% commission of however you define net as trailing off once the contract's terminated as a post-term commission, and how long the tail is, whether there's 5% of the work revenue generated from the work done during the term is commissioned in perpetuity, would be a form of equity. But of course, that's very passé to contract in those ways, at least in terms of what I found through this research, because it's more likely to be truncated as a tail of a post-term commission, and that's because of lawyers arguing that. So, yeah, it was interesting in that sense. And also live performance deductions are quite often the really important clause in management agreements, because it depends on how you define net. And if you factor in travel and accommodation, for example, then there's going to be a lot less commission as compared to if you don't factor those in. So, yeah, obviously when they go to form their own labels, there's issues of double dipping. So the extent to which artist managers will receive a label share as well as the artist manager's share, and how do you conflate the two to make it not problematic. And also the issue of artist managers getting in the way when they are actually forming these publishing deals to chase equity, and that causes problems in itself and cramps the industry. So in conclusion, if the manager decides to become the artist song publisher in order to obtain an equity stake, or simply to get their commissions, as some participants argued, then they may get in the way of bigger deals, and that may benefit the artist and the industry overall. So in a sense, it's a bit of an Adam Smith argument around your slice of the pie depends on the size of my slice of the pie. And the pie would be bigger if artist managers were given an equity stake in their clients' own businesses, like CEOs in other fields are. And this would be a simpler way to do it than currently is the normal common. And it would cause less problems in that sense. So that is my conclusion. Thank you very much. Over to the moderators.
Great, thank you so much, Guy. Does anyone have any questions? Matt, got your hand up.
Yeah. Hello, Guy. Thanks for the presentation. Really interesting. A qualification and then a question, really. So, what are you? Because I haven't read the article that you referred to. Are you advocating that sort of like the manager becomes a director of a limited company that's formed around the artist? Is that type of equity stake, or is it? Can you just explain a little bit more about the sort of proposed equity model?
Yeah. So the proposition would be that the artist manager gets points in co-writes or songs, gets points in records that are released. So it's one of those things in the creative industries where you look at why things are the way they are, and you could look at parallels to the film business and why do script writers assign the copyright and get paid a fee for service and not participate in capital income, these kind, like, why is it like that? And I think the odd one out in the music business is the record producer, who does get points, a percentage of, well, I mean, it's acceptable at least for them to negotiate to get a fee and points. So in a sense, it's similar to that, really, for artist managers, is what Luke at least was arguing. And in a sense, this paper is a bit of a interim paper, like the project's midstream or mid project. I'm not at a conclusion yet, and there's more work to do. But that's certainly at least how we're discussing it at this point.
So with that qualification, a question to follow is, so basically that's taking more percentage points out of the writer-artist's share of their copyrights, which lasts for a lot longer than the normal management contract. Given, I'm sure you're aware of like the broken record, equitable remuneration debates that happen in the UK at the minute, where it's already evident that artists get a bad deal anyway. How can managers advocate for a share of what's already, quite a minimal income from artists and writers and those types of things?
Yeah, I think the premise is really that the artist should be incentivizing managers to stick around and focus on management only. So the typical trajectory for managers is that they set up a service provision agreement that doesn't involve participation in equity, usually has a quite short post-term commission structure, and in the UK is typically net. There's no adjusted gross, so the live commissions are pretty thin for the manager. So what they end up doing is setting up, if they are successful in that relationship with the client, they set up as a label, and then they're doing two things or more things, and that's not servicing artists very well. So I mean, I take your point about them taking a slice of the pie, but if you think about Adam Smith's proposition around growth and that sort of macro or micro, in this case, economic perspective, then the pie would be bigger for artists if they had that talented person sticking around and helping to build the business, rather than leaving the industry or setting up as a label or as a publisher themselves, particularly if they set up as a publisher or label for that client, because they can block other deals, which is then problematic. And they can double dip too, which is not common at the top end of the business, but from what I understand, it's quite common at the entry to mid levels, and that's so it's this idea of having a different structure that would meet the times better post digitisation of the industry.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And it just that workplace culture of undervaluing creativities, regardless of what they're focused on, seems to be a strong theme.